keep hearing the same thing repeatedly from clients with anxiety. I feel like I can't take a deep breath in, and I'm not getting enough air. I can't breathe properly. And there's a term that people often bandy around, the term air hunger. In other words, I'm hungry for air. I can't take in enough. I'm always hungry for it. So if you struggle with anxiety and you relate to that, then stick around, because I'm going to share with you both my story of battling with air hunger for many years, why it happens, and how you can change it. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Howard Cooper, and this channel is all about giving you anxiety beating tips and psychological hacks to help you improve your life. I'm an ex-anxiety sufferer. I spent almost 20 years working with people clinically, helping them with anxiety, and that's the stuff that I'm sharing with you all. So if that's the sort of stuff you like the sound of, click subscribe, make sure you hit the bell so you'll be notified, and tell everyone about it. This is a topic that I am personally connected to. One of the things that I really struggled with was this thing that we term air hunger. I really felt like I couldn't breathe. It didn't matter how deep or big the breath was, it felt like it was never enough. And I always had that feeling that I was short of breath, and it got worse and worse and worse over time. I ended up seeing a respiratory consultant, and they did lung function tests, and I checked my blood oxygen levels, and they were all okay. What was going on? What was happening? That I felt like I couldn't take a deep breath in. People would say, well, it's just anxiety. But it didn't feel like anxiety. It felt like I literally couldn't breathe. And it got to the point sometimes where I'd be talking to people and I couldn't even get a full sentence out without having to stop and take a breath. And what would people do with me? They would tell me to do breathing exercises. One of the problems about air hunger that I found was that when I did breathing exercises, it really made me focus in on my breathing. And I had dysfunctional breathing. So I would spend the whole day being very conscious about my breathing, which is not normally what people do. They're just sort of going through the day and they're not conscious of it. And it became just the thing that was dominating my thinking. So the moment you'd wake up in the morning, one of the first thoughts would appear was, how's my breathing this morning? And there'd be a flicker of a moment where I go, oh, it feels okay, it doesn't feel so bad. But the moment I paid attention to it, suddenly now I'm conscious of it, and I would have that experience. I thought I was alone. I thought really that this was something that there must be something physically wrong with me. Here's the news for you. If you relate to this, number one, there is a physical thing going on. And I'm going to show you what that is and how you can reverse it. But just as a quick caveat, it is worth being checked out by a doctor or talking to them about it, and just make sure there's nothing else going on. Because I'm not a doctor and there can be other causes for shortness of breath, if you're concerned, go and speak to a doctor as well. But if they turn around and say you're absolutely fine, it's probably just anxiety, then this is stuff that's really going to help you break that cycle. Let's just take a moment and look at carbon dioxide. When you're active, when you move your tissues, they take in oxygen and they give off carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, as you're active, carbon dioxide levels build in the body. When there's an increase of carbon dioxide in the body, you get an urge to breathe. Why? Because it's not so much about taking in oxygen, it's also about getting rid of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, increases. That's what kind of triggers that urge to breathe. Just park that for a moment. If you struggle with anxiety, one of the things that's likely is that people have got into over-breathing patterns. Mainly because what's the common advice when people tell you when you suffer with anxiety? They go, take deep breaths. So people spend a lot of time doing deep breaths, which they confuse for big breaths. Often they open their mouth and do a lot of mouth breathing. Here's the effect of having some dysfunctional breathing patterns or over-breathing for a long time. Your carbon dioxide levels, they go down. You're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. And then what happens is your body makes all sorts of adjustments to the lower levels of carbon dioxide, one of which is to become very sensitive to any increase in carbon dioxide at all. It's a little bit like this. Have you met people who can't hold their liquor? The technical term, I think, is Larry lightweight. These are people for whom even just a sip, one little sip of alcohol sends them practically into a drunk stupor. In other words, because they don't do it very much, because they have low levels of alcohol in their system normally, even the tiniest, smallest amount triggers the drunk response in a way that, let's be honest,
If someone is very used to drinking, they can tolerate a lot more before they see the effects.
Please don't misunderstand. I'm not condoning becoming an alcoholic as the cure for air hunger. I'm simply using this as a metaphor.
If you wanted, for example, to increase your tolerance to alcohol, the answer would be not to quick avoid all alcohol. It would be to gradually expose yourself to more and more of it so your body can acclimatize and build up a tolerance. That's what we need to do.
You wouldn't go straight from having zero alcohol to having so much that you're just blotto, throwing up, and it's very unpleasant. No, that would be ridiculous. But you might have a little bit more than you had the day before. Why? Because your body gets more used to it. You give your body a chance to acclimatize to slightly higher levels. And then over time, you gradually build up and build up. And what happens is your body then has a chance to reset your tolerance levels. Now, the same thing happens with carbon dioxide.
Because of over-breathing, I got into a pattern where I lowered my CO2 levels in my bloodstream, and my body was now becoming very highly sensitive to any increase. Now, what increases CO2? Anything, activity, moving. Your cells take in oxygen, they give off carbon dioxide. Anything that involves any form of energy is going to release more carbon dioxide. So this is why when it gets really bad, I felt like I was even talking. I couldn't get through a sentence without having to take a deep breath. And that's why.
If you've been over-breathing for a long time, it's a good idea to do certain exercises to give your body an opportunity to acclimatize and make some alterations so that you can tolerate slightly higher levels of carbon dioxide in the system before giving you that urge to breathe. That is the solution to anxiety-based air hunger.
This, by the way, is also why I get so frustrated when I go online and I see people saying, I feel like I can't take a deep breath in. Does anyone else have this problem? And hundreds of people all start saying, yes, I have that. It's really terrible. But the only advice that people seem to be giving is to just relax and take some deep breaths. People who are struggling with air hunger shouldn't be taking more deep breaths. They're over-breathing. So chances are you need to be training yourself to breathe in a more shallow way. I know it seems counterintuitive, because if you feel like you can't take a deep breath in, what do? You want to breathe more, harder, faster, and it really seems that way. And that's one of the reasons why air hunger can be such a tricky beast to deal with, because your body's telling you need to breathe more, but the way to deal with this is actually to practice reduced breathing. Once I got my head around that and I began to do some of the exercises that I'm going to show you and talk you through when I'm back in the office, you give your body an opportunity to go back to how it should be in terms of your breathing levels and your breathing capacity. It was the only thing I found that really worked and worked well. But it can take time, so it's not an immediate fix. It's a little bit like training. Go back to the alcohol metaphor. You can't expect to have a little bit more to drink one day and then suddenly you've got a high tolerance for alcohol. You've got to commit to really working your way up. But it's better to move in the direction where you're getting better than do the things that I know are likely to make you worse and exacerbate the problem.
There's a few steps to dealing with air hunger. Firstly, know that it's normal. Know that if you've been mouth breathing for a long time or potentially over breathing, then having air hunger is not abnormal. It's just your body becoming overly sensitive to increases of carbon dioxide, and you can train yourself out of it. And intuitively, when I struggled with this, one of the things that I found actually helped was, instead of taking deep breaths, was to kind of sit with the feeling that I wasn't taking enough oxygen, but do much more shallow breathing, lighter breaths. It's only years later that I realized that what I was actually doing was allowing my body to sit with a slight buildup of carbon dioxide so I could get used to it again. Learn to breathe through your nose and not through your mouth. When you breathe through your mouth, the space is bigger and more open. It's easier to overbreathe. If you overbreathe for a long time, you can get into these chronic dysfunctional breathing patterns. Whereas breathing with your nose helps regulate the amount of air in and out, which really helps reduce anxiety. And by the way, some people even tape their mouths at night. Don't think I'm crazy. Seriously, I've done this before as well. And go and check out things like the Buteyko breathing method. Really, really useful. But yeah, some people will tape their mouth at night to make sure that they are forced to breathe through their nose. Now, there's actually a test, by the way, that you can do right now, and I'm going to show you, called a control pause, where you can actually get a sense of how much carbon dioxide can I tolerate? Is it around normal, or could I improve on it? So what you do is you take a normal, gentle breath in and out through the nose, and after your out breath, you'll pinch your nose and you count, set a timer, and what you want to count is the number of seconds before you get a definite urge to breathe. Please note, this is not how long can I hold my breath for, which is really about when you get the urge to breathe, you still fight it and you go, no, no, no. You just want to see how long before you get a definite feeling that, yeah, it's time for a breath. So it might look a little bit like this. Okay, so for me, that was about, 19 seconds, 20 seconds. That could be improved. But that would be my control pause test. By the way, I've often found that people with anxiety, or if you've been overbreathing, or you have a very low tolerance to a buildup of carbon dioxide, here's what happens. The moment you start holding your nose, carbon dioxide starts building up in the system, and you're likely to get a feeling that you need to breathe much quicker than someone who has I would say, a healthier level of carbon dioxide tolerance. So I've had people who will sit and they're literally 2 seconds, 3 seconds in, and they need to take a breath. That's a good marker, and it's worth making a note of it somewhere with the date so that you can see where you were at that time. That way, you can start practicing some of these exercises that I'm going to give you, and then you can track, is your control pause actually getting better? And what will happen is, as your control pause increases, you'll notice air hunger seems to decrease. A bit like the drinking metaphor. We want to build up your tolerance to carbon dioxide, but this is not about just going full tilt into exposing yourselves to very high levels of carbon dioxide straight away. No! What you want to do is you want to aim to put yourself in a position where you have some manageable, mild air hunger for a certain period of time. So if you go too far into it, you don't want to trigger panic and anxiety and I can't breathe, but you want to feel a little bit of air hunger, just mild, at a level at which you can cope with. Why? When you do that, that feeling of slight air hunger, that's the feeling that you need to enable your body to start going, oh, right, we need to start adjusting to these levels. It's doing that over time that puts everything back into whack. Here's what you want to do. Whatever your control pause result was, maybe halve it, right? And have that number in your head. So if my control pause I did for 20 seconds, the number I'm going to work with is 10 seconds. I'm going to do some 10-second breath holds. And here is one of the exercises that I used to do a lot, which really helped me. So first of all, you breathe in through your nose. So I do a couple of breaths in and out through the nose. Nice, shallow, normal, natural breaths through the nose. And then after the second breath out, I just hold my nose and do a breath hold for half the time of my control pause. If you did a control pause for 5, do 2 or 3 seconds. That's all. After you've pinched your nose and you've done that breath hold, you then want to go back to normal, natural breathing through your nose for a couple of times for around 10 seconds. And after a breath out, pinch again. Another breath hold. And you do that cycle flitting between pinching and a breath hold and normal natural breathing in and out through the nose gently, and do that for a couple of minutes, right? After a couple of minutes, you should feel that slight air hunger, perhaps even for the last 30-40 seconds of that exercise. Great. And then just relax. Go about your business, but repeat that 5-6 times a day. Now here's what's going to happen. Over time, you'll notice that that number that you've been using and doing breath holds for is just too easy. You're now getting to the end, you don't feel any air hunger at all, and that's the point at which you start increasing the number that you're holding the breath for. Because you want to get a little bit of mild air hunger, and every so often, 3-4 days time, do another control pause test and see, and you'll literally track your control pause going up over time. What people tend to say is that if you have a control pause that's less than 20 seconds, then chances are you may have some breathing experiences that are less than desirable. Wheezing, coughing, that feeling of air hunger. But the closer you can get to 40, wow, that's pretty good. The closer you'll be to having really good function. Now, some people don't get to 40. You might need to do some exercise whilst doing some reduced breathing. But, you know, I've worked with people who have a control pause well under 10 seconds. And if that's something that you relate, that was me, by the way, when I struggled originally with it. If you have a control pause that's somewhere between 5 and 15, that may be a sign that you have been over breathing, which certainly in Western society we tend to have more of a prevalence of. And what's interesting, by the way, is I've often given these exercises to people working with anxiety to correct mouth breathing, but find that they just generally feel less anxious as their control pause gets better. So not just the air hunger goes, but anxiety tends to reduce as well. It's a really fantastic thing to do. Do your best not to add rumination to it. So what do you do if you become very conscious of your breathing? I mean, here's what I would do. I used to notice the breathing and then just remind myself to breathe through the nose and do shallow breathing, and to know that that feeling of mild air hunger, that was a good sign that I was giving my body an opportunity to readjust and get back into normal levels. Almost kind of accepting and moving towards that feeling, even though it wasn't pleasant, was really helpful in terms of changing the pattern. And that's something that I thoroughly recommend too. And if this has helped, let me know in the comments below. If you have questions, let me know in the comments below. Now, here's a quick reminder. I do work with clients one-on-one, and I see people both face-to-face, but also I see people all around the world online helping them with these sorts of issues. If you want to work one-on-one with me, then feel free to check out my website, www.rapidchange.works. You can find out all about how you can connect with me. In the meantime, hope this has helped. See you soon.